In the grand corridors of Windsor Castle, where centuries of royal secrets whisper through ancient stone walls, Senior Guard Captain Marcus Thompson had walked the same patrol route for 15 years. He knew every creak of the floorboards, every shadow cast by moonlight through stained glass windows, every sound that belonged, and every sound that didn't. But on that fog-shrouded November evening in 2019, something was terribly wrong. A soft, muffled sobbing echoed from somewhere within the castle walls, yet every room he checked stood empty. The sound seemed to come from the very stones themselves, haunting and desperate, the unmistakable cry of a child in distress. What Marcus discovered behind that seemingly solid wall would not only change his life forever, but reveal a royal family's darkest moment and a little prince's incredible courage in the face of unimaginable terror. This is the true story of how one guard's instinct to protect led to the most shocking discovery in modern royal history, and why the palace tried desperately to keep it secret. Marcus Thompson adjusted his radio as he began his evening patrol through the east wing of Windsor Castle. The November rain hammered against the ancient windows, creating a symphony of sound that had become as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. At 42 years old, Marcus had dedicated over half his life to protecting the royal family, rising through the ranks from a young recruit to one of the most trusted members of the Royal Protection Squad. The castle felt different that evening. Perhaps it was the storm brewing outside, or maybe it was the unusual silence that seemed to press against the walls like a living thing. The Prince of Wales and his family were in residence, having arrived earlier that afternoon for a private family gathering. Marcus had seen Prince Louis playing in the gardens earlier, his infectious laughter echoing through the courtyard as he chased butterflies with his sister Charlotte. As Marcus made his way through the portrait gallery, his trained eyes automatically scanned every corner, every shadow. The faces of long-dead monarchs seemed to watch him from their gilded frames, their eyes following his movement as he passed beneath them. He had walked this route thousands of times, but tonight something felt off, a subtle shift in the atmosphere that made his instincts prickle with unease. The sound came as he rounded the corner near the Queen's private study. At first, Marcus thought it might be the wind whistling through the ancient stonework, but as he stopped to listen more carefully, his blood ran cold. It was crying, the unmistakable sound of a child in distress. The sobbing was muffled, distant, as if it were coming from somewhere beyond the walls themselves. Marcus immediately pressed his radio. "Control, this is Thompson in the East Wing. I'm hearing what sounds like a child crying, but I can't locate the source. Are all family members accounted for?" The response crackled back within seconds. "Thompson, all family members are confirmed in the private quarters. Prince Louis was put to bed an hour ago by his nanny. Probably just the storm playing tricks on your ears." But Marcus knew better. In his 15 years of service, he had learned to trust his instincts above all else. The sound wasn't the wind, and it wasn't his imagination. Somewhere in this ancient castle, a child was crying, and every fiber of his being told him it was urgent. He began a systematic search of the area, checking every room, every alcove, every possible hiding place. The Queen's study was empty, the door locked as expected. The adjacent sitting rooms showed no signs of disturbance. Yet the crying continued, seeming to grow more desperate with each passing moment. The sound led him to a section of the castle he rarely patrolled, a narrow corridor lined with tapestries that depicted ancient hunting scenes. The walls here were particularly thick, part of the castle's original 12th century construction. As Marcus moved deeper into the corridor, the crying became more distinct, more heartbreaking. It was definitely a young child, and whoever it was, they were terrified. Marcus ran his hands along the wall, pressing against the ancient stones, searching for any sign of a hidden passage or loose panel. Windsor Castle was famous for its secret passages and hidden chambers, many of which hadn't been used or even remembered for decades. The royal family's history was full of stories about hidden priests' holes, escape routes, and concealed rooms that had sheltered everyone from Catholic clergy during the Reformation to members of the royal family during World War II. His fingers found it almost by accident, a slight depression in the wall where the mortar had crumbled away. When he pressed against it, he felt the stone give way slightly, as if it were mounted on some kind of hinge mechanism. The crying was louder now, definitely coming from behind this section of wall. Marcus's training kicked in immediately. Protocol demanded that he call for backup before investigating any potential security breach, but the increasingly desperate nature of the crying made him hesitate. If a child was trapped behind this wall, every second could matter. He made a decision that would later be questioned by his superiors, but would ultimately prove to be the right one. Using his shoulder, Marcus pressed hard against the loose stone panel. With a grinding sound that seemed to echo through the centuries, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow passage that disappeared into darkness. The musty smell of centuries-old air rushed out, along with something else, the unmistakable scent of fear and tears. Marcus clicked on his flashlight and called out softly, "Hello? Is someone there? It's okay. I'm here to help." The crying stopped abruptly, replaced by a silence that was somehow even more disturbing. Marcus squeezed through the narrow opening, his broad shoulders barely fitting through the gap. The passage was cramped, clearly designed for people much smaller than his 6-foot frame. The beam of his flashlight revealed a narrow stone corridor that seemed to stretch deeper into the castle's foundation. The walls were covered with centuries of grime, and spiderwebs hung like ghostly curtains in the stale air. Marcus had studied the castle's blueprints extensively during his training, but this passage wasn't marked on any modern architectural plan he had ever seen. As he moved forward, his radio crackled with static, the thick stone walls interfering with the signal. He was effectively cut off from the outside world, but he couldn't turn back now. The crying had resumed, fainter now but still audible, leading him deeper into the forgotten bowels of the castle. The passage opened into a small chamber, barely 6 feet square, with walls that showed evidence of hasty construction. Someone had walled this space off, but not recently. The mortar was old, possibly dating back decades or even centuries. But what made Marcus's heart nearly stop was what he found in the corner of that tiny, airless room. Prince Louis sat huddled against the far wall, his small frame shaking with sobs. The 5-year-old prince was still in his pajamas, the ones decorated with cartoon dinosaurs that Marcus had seen him wearing at dinner earlier that evening. His face was streaked with tears and dust, his normally bright blue eyes wide with terror. "Prince Louis!" Marcus exclaimed, immediately dropping to his knees and switching to the gentle tone he used with his own children. "It's okay. I'm Marcus. I'm one of the guards who keeps your family safe. Can you tell me how you got here?" The little prince looked up at him with recognition dawning in his eyes. He had seen Marcus around the castle many times, had even waved at him from windows during his security rounds. But now Louis seemed to struggle with whether to trust him, his small body trembling as he pressed himself further against the wall. "I was scared," Louis whispered, his voice barely audible. "The man said he was playing a game, but it wasn't fun. He said I had to stay quiet or something bad would happen to Mummy and Daddy." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the damp air of the hidden chamber. Someone had deliberately brought the prince to this concealed room and left him here. This wasn't a case of a curious child getting lost. This was something far more sinister. "What man, Louis? Can you tell me what he looked like?" Marcus asked gently, even as his mind raced through the security protocols he would need to follow. Every person who had access to the castle that evening would need to be questioned. Every security camera would need to be reviewed. Every possible breach would need to be investigated. Prince Louis's face crumpled with fresh tears. "He had the uniform like yours, but different. He said he was a special guard, and that Daddy had sent him to play a hiding game with me. But then he went away and didn't come back, and I got scared because it was dark and I couldn't get out." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Someone wearing a security uniform had gained access to the prince, had convinced him to come to this hidden location, and then abandoned him there, whether it was a kidnapping attempt gone wrong, an inside job, or something else entirely. One thing was certain. There was a serious security breach that went to the very heart of the royal protection system. Marcus carefully lifted Prince Louis into his arms, feeling the child's small body relax slightly against his chest. "You're safe now, Prince Louis. I'm going to take you back to your mummy and daddy right away. But first, I need to call for help to make sure everything is secure." As he made his way back through the narrow passage, carrying the prince and navigating by the light of his flashlight, Marcus's mind was already working through the implications of what had just happened. This hidden chamber had been used to conceal a member of the royal family, possibly as part of a kidnapping plot or worse. The fact that it was concealed behind what appeared to be original medieval construction suggested that someone with intimate knowledge of the castle's hidden passages had been involved. When they emerged back into the tapestry-lined corridor, Marcus immediately pressed his radio. "Control, this is Thompson. I have Prince Louis with me, and we have a Code Red security situation. I repeat, Code Red. I need immediate backup and a full lockdown of the castle. Someone has compromised our security, and the prince was found in a concealed chamber in the East Wing." The response was immediate and intense. Within minutes, the castle was swarming with additional security personnel, detectives, and royal protection officers. The Prince of Wales and his wife were notified immediately, and the emotional reunion between parents and child was both heartbreaking and relieving to witness. But even as Prince Louis was safely returned to his family, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they had only uncovered the tip of something much larger and more dangerous. The hidden chamber had been prepared specifically for this purpose, and whoever was behind it had intimate knowledge of both the castle's secret passages and the royal family's routines. As he gave his initial statement to the investigating officers, Marcus found himself wondering about all the other hidden spaces within Windsor Castle's ancient walls. If this chamber had been concealed and forgotten for who knows how long, what other secrets might be lurking behind the castle's seemingly solid stone facade? And more importantly, who else might know about them? The night was far from over, and Marcus had a sinking feeling that the discovery of Prince Louis was just the beginning of a much larger and more complex investigation that would shake the very foundations of royal security. Someone had breached not just the castle's defenses, but the trust that was supposed to protect the most vulnerable members of the royal family. And until they found out who and why, no one in the castle was truly safe. The emergency response team arrived at Windsor Castle within 20 minutes of Marcus's radio call, transforming the usually serene royal residence into a hive of investigative activity. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Matthews of the Specialist Protection Branch led the team, her years of experience in royal security immediately evident as she took control of the situation with calm efficiency. Marcus found himself in the Castle's Security Command Center, a modern facility hidden beneath the ancient structure, surrounded by banks of monitors showing feeds from hundreds of security cameras positioned throughout the grounds and interior. The contrast between the medieval castle above and this high-tech nerve center below perfectly illustrated the challenges facing modern royal protection, maintaining security in a building that was never designed with contemporary threats in mind. "Tell me exactly what happened, from the beginning," DCI Matthews said, her notepad ready as she studied Marcus with sharp, intelligent eyes. "Leave nothing out, no matter how insignificant it might seem." Marcus recounted every detail of the evening, from the moment he first heard the crying to finding Prince Louis in the hidden chamber. As he spoke, other officers were already examining the concealed passage, photographing every inch of the space and looking for any evidence that might reveal who had been behind the incident.
"You mentioned that Prince Louis said the person was wearing a uniform similar to yours?"
Matthews pressed. "Did he give any other description of this person?" "He was too shaken to provide much detail," Marcus replied. "Just that it was someone in what looked like security clothing who claimed to be a special guard, sent by his father." "The prince is only 5 years old, Inspector. Whoever did this knew exactly how to manipulate a child's trust." The implications were deeply troubling. The royal protection system was built on layers of verification and protocol. Every person who had legitimate access to the royal family was thoroughly vetted, their movements tracked, their presence accounted for at all times. For someone to have gained access to Prince Louis without triggering any of these safeguards suggested either a catastrophic failure of the security system, or worse, involvement by someone already inside the trusted circle. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, a child psychologist who often worked with the royal family, arrived to speak with Prince Louis. Her gentle approach helped the young prince provide additional details about his experience, though each revelation only deepened the mystery and heightened the concerns about the security breach. "The man knew my name," Prince Louis told Dr. Harper as his parents sat nearby, their faces etched with worry and barely controlled anger. "He knew about my dinosaur pajamas, and he knew that I liked to play hide-and-seek with Charlotte. He said Daddy had told him about the special hiding place where princes used to hide long ago." Prince William's jaw tightened at this information. The fact that the perpetrator had possessed such intimate knowledge of his family's private life was deeply disturbing. "How long was Lewis in that chamber?" he asked DCI Matthews. "Based on the timeline and witness statements, we believe approximately 2 hours," Matthews replied. "He was put to bed at 8 o'clock by his nanny, who checked on him at 8:30 and confirmed he was asleep. The next check wasn't scheduled until 10:30, which is when his absence was discovered. Officer Thompson found him at approximately 10:15. The investigation revealed disturbing gaps in the castle's security coverage. The section of corridor where the hidden chamber was located had been considered a low-priority area, covered by fewer cameras, and patrolled less frequently than other parts of the building. Whoever had orchestrated this incident had chosen their location with careful consideration of these security blind spots. Marcus accompanied the investigation team as they thoroughly examined the hidden chamber and passage. The space showed signs of recent use, fresh scratches on the stone where the secret door had been opened, and most disturbing of all, evidence that someone had prepared the chamber specifically for occupancy. A small battery-powered light had been placed in one corner, along with a plastic bottle of water and what appeared to be a child's coloring book and crayons. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, observed Detective Sergeant James Chen, who specialized in crime scene analysis. Someone planned this carefully. They prepared this space, studied the security routines, and chose their timing precisely. The question is whether this was meant to be a temporary hiding place during a larger operation, or whether the plan was to keep Prince Louis here for an extended period. The technical investigation team discovered that the hidden passage connected to a network of forgotten medieval corridors that honeycombed the oldest sections of Windsor Castle. Many of these passages appeared on no modern architectural plans, having been sealed off and forgotten over the centuries. A few were known to historians and castle maintenance staff, but most remained unmapped and unexplored. "We're essentially dealing with a castle within a castle," explained Dr. Michael Foster, a historian who had spent decades studying Windsor's architectural evolution. These passages were built for various purposes over the centuries: escape routes during times of war, servant corridors, hiding places for valuables during raids. Many were sealed off during renovations in the Victorian era and forgotten. Someone with access to historical records or intimate knowledge of the castle's construction could potentially map out an entire network of hidden routes. The security camera review proved both revealing and frustrating. While the cameras had captured Prince Louis being led away from his room by a figure in what appeared to be castle security uniform, the person's face was never clearly visible. They seemed to know exactly where the cameras were positioned and how to avoid providing a clear image. The uniform appeared authentic, complete with proper identification badges and security equipment. Whoever this was, they had inside knowledge, Marcus observed as he reviewed the footage with the investigation team. They knew our patrol schedules, our camera positions, our uniform specifications. This level of detail suggests either someone with current access to our security protocols or someone who had such access recently. The investigation expanded to include a complete review of everyone who had been in the castle that evening, from senior staff to maintenance workers to delivery personnel. Each person's movements were tracked and verified against security logs and camera footage. The process revealed just how many people had legitimate access to different areas of the castle on any given day. Dozens of staff members, contractors, suppliers, and officials, each with varying levels of clearance and access. Prince Louis underwent additional gentle questioning over the following days, with Dr. Harper helping him process the traumatic experience while extracting crucial details. The young prince's memory, while sometimes confused by fear and the strange nature of his experience, provided important clues about the timeline and the perpetrator's behavior. "He kept telling me it was almost time for the special part of the game," Lewis told Dr. Harper during one session. "He said someone important was coming to meet me, but then he had to go away for a while first. He promised he would come back, but he never did." This revelation sent chills through the investigation team. It suggested that Prince Louis's concealment in the hidden chamber wasn't the end goal, but rather preparation for something else. Perhaps a handoff to another person, or transport to a different location. The fact that this next phase of the plan had apparently failed or been abandoned raised questions about whether the perpetrator had been scared off by something, or whether they were still out there, waiting for another opportunity. The castle's historical records became a crucial part of the investigation. Researchers combed through centuries of architectural plans, renovation records, and historical accounts, trying to map the complete network of hidden passages and chambers. What they discovered was both fascinating and deeply concerning. Windsor Castle contained dozens of concealed spaces, many of which hadn't been opened or examined in living memory. "We found references to passages that were sealed during World War II for security reasons," reported Dr. Foster. "Others were blocked off during various renovations over the past century. Some passages apparently connect to locations outside the castle walls entirely, medieval escape routes that could potentially provide access from external locations. The security implications were staggering. If someone had managed to map these forgotten passages, they could potentially move throughout much of the castle without being detected by modern security systems. The passages predated all electronic surveillance by centuries, creating blind spots in the security coverage that no one had previously considered." Marcus found himself working closely with the investigation team, his intimate knowledge of the castle's daily routines and security procedures proving invaluable. But as the days passed and no arrest was made, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. The person responsible for taking Prince Louis remained at large, and there was no guarantee they wouldn't try again. The psychological profile developed by behavioral analysts painted a disturbing picture of the perpetrator. They appeared to be someone with extensive planning capabilities, intimate knowledge of royal security procedures, and the patience to prepare their operation over an extended period. Most concerning was the evidence that they had been studying the royal family's private routines and behaviors, suggesting ongoing surveillance and planning. This wasn't someone acting impulsively or opportunistically, explained Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the criminal psychologist consulting on the case. The level of preparation, the knowledge of the castle's hidden passages, the careful timing, all of this suggests someone who had been planning this operation for months, possibly years. The question is whether their goal was kidnapping, ransom, or something else entirely. As the investigation continued, additional security measures were implemented throughout the castle. New cameras were installed to cover previously monitored areas, electronic sensors were placed in the discovered passages, and the patrol schedules were completely reorganized. The royal family's daily routines were also altered to eliminate predictable patterns that could be exploited by someone with inside knowledge. But despite all these precautions, one disturbing fact remained. Somewhere out there was a person who had successfully breached royal security, had gained access to a young prince, and had demonstrated intimate knowledge of the castle's most closely guarded secrets. Until that person was found and the full extent of their operation was uncovered, the royal family remained at risk. Marcus continued his patrols with heightened vigilance. But he also found himself studying the ancient walls and corridors with new eyes. Every tapestry could potentially conceal a hidden door. Every seemingly solid stone wall might hide a passage. Every quiet corner could potentially shelter someone with malicious intent. The castle that had been his workplace for 15 years had become a puzzle of dangerous possibilities, and he was determined to help solve it before anyone else was put at risk. The investigation was far from over, and Marcus sensed that the discovery of Prince Louis was just the first piece of a much larger and more complex puzzle. Someone had violated the safety of the royal family in the most intimate way possible, and until they were caught, no one could rest easy within the ancient walls of Windsor Castle. The investigation entered its second week with no arrests and mounting pressure from the highest levels of government. The Prime Minister had been briefed on the security breach, and there were whispered conversations about the possibility of relocating the royal family to a more secure location until the perpetrator was captured. The media had not yet gotten wind of the incident, but everyone involved knew that such a significant security failure couldn't be kept secret indefinitely. Marcus found himself assigned to a special task force dedicated specifically to exploring and mapping the castle's hidden passage network. Working alongside structural engineers, historians, and security experts, he spent his days crawling through narrow medieval corridors and examining chambers that hadn't seen daylight for decades or even centuries. The scope of the hidden network was far more extensive than anyone had imagined. Ground-penetrating radar revealed passages running beneath the entire castle, connecting different wings and levels in ways that completely bypassed modern security installations. Some passages appeared to extend beyond the castle walls entirely, though many of these external connections had been filled with rubble over the centuries. "It's like discovering a completely different building inside the one we thought we knew," Marcus explained to his wife Sarah during one of their evening phone calls. Due to security protocols, he was staying at the castle until the investigation was completed, sleeping in staff quarters and working around the clock to help solve the mystery. Sarah, a nurse at the local hospital, understood the importance of his work but worried about the toll it was taking on him. "You sound exhausted, love. Are you taking care of yourself?" "I keep thinking about Prince Louis," Marcus admitted. "How terrified he must have been in that dark chamber." "If we don't catch whoever did this, they might try again. I can't let that happen." The task force had discovered several particularly concerning passages during their exploration. One led from the area near the royal family's private quarters to a chamber beneath the castle's chapel, while another seemed to connect the kitchens to an external location near the castle walls. Each discovery raised new questions about how long someone might have been using these passages for surveillance or planning. Detective Chief Inspector Matthews had expanded her investigation to include former castle employees, contractors who had worked on recent renovations, and historians who had studied the castle's architecture. The list of people with potential knowledge of the hidden passages was surprisingly long, and each required thorough investigation. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Foster, the historian who had been helping to map the passages, discovered a set of architectural drawings in the Royal Archive that had been misfiled for decades. The drawings, dating from the 1950s, showed detailed plans for sealing various passages during post-war security upgrades. More importantly, they included handwritten notes about which passages were to be left accessible for emergency purposes. "These notes aren't in the official records," Dr. Foster explained to the investigation team. Someone deliberately removed references to certain passages from the final documentation. The question is whether this was done for legitimate security reasons or whether someone was preserving knowledge of these passages for other purposes. The investigation team cross-referenced the names on the historical documents with current and former castle staff. One name appeared repeatedly in the records: Thomas Whitmore, who had served as deputy castle superintendent from 1975 to 2010. Whitmore had been involved in numerous renovation projects over his 35-year career and would have had access to historical architectural records. When investigators attempted to locate Whitmore for questioning, they discovered that he had died 3 years earlier. However, his personal papers, donated to the local historical society after his death, contained detailed maps and notes about Windsor Castle's hidden passages. More disturbing still, the papers included what appeared to be surveillance notes about the royal family's daily routines, dating back several years. Whitmore seems to have been obsessed with the castle's hidden history, DCI Matthews reported to the task force. His papers include detailed diagrams of passages that don't appear on any official plans, along with notes about how they could be accessed without detection. But he's been dead for 3 years, so someone else must have had access to his research. The investigation into Whitmore's background revealed a man who had become increasingly bitter about his treatment during his final years of service. He had been passed over for promotion to castle superintendent several times, and his retirement had been somewhat acrimonious. His papers suggested that he believed he had been undervalued and that his extensive knowledge of the castle's history had been dismissed by his superiors. More concerning were Whitmore's family connections. His nephew, David Whitmore, had worked as a contractor on several castle renovation projects over the past 5 years. David had access to security protocols, uniform specifications, and detailed knowledge of staff schedules. When investigators attempted to locate him for questioning, they discovered that he had taken extended leave from his construction company immediately after the incident with Prince Louis. The manhunt for David Whitmore intensified when investigators discovered that he had been using his uncle's research to create detailed maps of the castle's hidden passages. His apartment, when searched, contained photographs of the royal family, copies of staff schedules, and what appeared to be surveillance notes documenting the movements of family members over several weeks. Marcus was part of the team that searched Whitmore's apartment, and what they found there made his blood run cold. On the walls were detailed floor plans of Windsor Castle, with the hidden passages marked in red ink. Photographs of Prince Louis and his siblings were arranged alongside notes about their daily routines, favorite activities, and security protocols. This isn't just about one incident, Marcus realized as he examined the evidence. Whitmore has been planning something much larger. The chamber where we found Prince Louis was just the beginning. The investigation revealed that David Whitmore had been systematically studying the royal family's routines for months. He had used his legitimate access to the castle as a contractor to install small surveillance devices in several locations, allowing him to monitor family movements and security procedures. The devices were so sophisticated and well concealed that they had gone undetected by routine security sweeps. Analysis of the surveillance data recovered from Whitmore's apartment showed that he had been particularly focused on the movements of the youngest royals. He had documented their playtimes, their favorite locations within the castle, and the schedules of their caregivers. The evidence suggested that the incident with Prince Louis had been intended as a test run for a much more ambitious kidnapping plan. He was learning from the first attempt, DCI Matthews explained to the Royal Protection Team, testing our response times, studying how we conduct searches, identifying weaknesses in our protocols. If he hadn't been scared off by something during the first incident, he might have attempted something even more serious. The search for David Whitmore became a national priority, with police forces across the country alerted to his description and photograph. His background check revealed a man who had struggled financially in recent years, facing mounting debts and the failure of his construction business. His uncle's death had apparently provided him with both the knowledge and the motivation to attempt something desperate. Meanwhile, the royal family had been relocated to a secure wing of the castle, while additional security measures were implemented. The children's routines were completely changed, with new protocols for meals, playtime, and sleep arrangements. Additional guards were assigned specifically to protect the younger members of the family, and all staff access was reviewed and restricted. Prince Louis, despite his young age, seemed to understand that something serious had happened. He had been asking about the man in the uniform and wanted to know if the hiding game was over. Child psychologists worked with him daily to help process the traumatic experience, while also gently extracting any additional details about his encounter with Whitmore that might help the investigation. The technical investigation team made another disturbing discovery when they examined the chamber where Prince Louis had been found. Hidden beneath loose stones in the floor were additional supplies: food, water, children's clothing, and what appeared to be sleeping materials. The chamber had been prepared not just for temporary concealment, but for extended occupation. This suggests that Whitmore's plan involved keeping Prince Louis hidden for days or weeks, not hours, Detective Sergeant Chen observed. The question is whether this was meant to be a ransom situation, or whether he had some other motive. Analysis of Whitmore's financial records revealed contact with several suspicious individuals in the weeks leading up to the incident. Bank transfers and phone records suggested that he had been in communication with people who might have been involved in planning the operation or providing financial backing. The investigation expanded to include these potential accomplices, raising concerns that Whitmore might have been part of a larger conspiracy. The psychological profile of David Whitmore painted a picture of a man driven by a combination of financial desperation, personal grievance, and obsession with the royal family. His uncle's research had provided him with the knowledge and opportunity, but his own emotional instability had made him willing to cross lines that would have been unthinkable to a rational person. He seems to have convinced himself that he was entitled to something from the royal family, explained Dr. Walsh, the criminal psychologist. His uncle's long service and perceived mistreatment created a sense of grievance that David inherited and expanded upon. In his mind, taking Prince Louis might have been a way to force the recognition and compensation that he believed his family was owed. As the investigation continued, Marcus found himself thinking more and more about the broader implications of what they had uncovered. The security breach had revealed fundamental weaknesses in the protection of the royal family, but it had also highlighted the incredible complexity of securing a medieval castle in the modern world. The ancient walls that had protected monarchs for centuries now harbored secrets that could be exploited by modern criminals. Every historical feature that made Windsor Castle unique also created potential security vulnerabilities. The challenge was finding ways to preserve the castle's historical integrity while ensuring the safety of its current occupants. The hunt for David Whitmore intensified as evidence mounted that he was still in the area and might be planning another attempt. Additional security cameras were installed throughout the castle grounds, and the patrol schedules were randomized to prevent anyone from predicting guard movements. But everyone involved in the investigation knew that until Whitmore was captured, the royal family remained at risk. Marcus continued his work with the task force, exploring forgotten passages and helping to secure potential entry points. Each day brought new discoveries about the castle's hidden network, but also new concerns about what other secrets might be lurking behind Windsor's ancient walls. The investigation had revealed that protecting the royal family required not just modern security technology, but also a thorough understanding of centuries of history that lived within the castle's very stones. The manhunt was entering a critical phase, and Marcus could feel the pressure mounting on everyone involved. Somewhere out there, David Whitmore was still free, still dangerous, and still in possession of knowledge about Windsor Castle that could be used to threaten the royal family. Until he was found, no one could rest easy, and the ancient castle would remain both a home and a potential trap for those it was meant to protect. The breakthrough in the David Whitmore manhunt came from an unexpected source: a groundskeeper who had been working at Windsor Castle for over 20 years. William Hayes had been trimming hedges near the castle's outer walls when he noticed something unusual: fresh footprints in the mud near what appeared to be a blocked entrance to one of the ancient passages. Hayes immediately reported his discovery to security, and within an hour, Marcus was examining the area with a team of investigators. The entrance had been concealed behind centuries of overgrown ivy and accumulated debris, but someone had recently cleared a path just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. "This passage isn't on any of our maps," observed Detective Sergeant Chen as he photographed the concealed entrance. "If Whitmore knows about this access point, he could potentially enter and exit the castle grounds without being detected by our perimeter security." The passage led to a network of tunnels that appeared to predate even the oldest parts of the current castle structure. These weren't the medieval servant corridors they had been exploring, but something far older, possibly Saxon or even Roman foundations that had been incorporated into the castle's construction over the centuries. Marcus volunteered to lead the exploration team into the newly discovered tunnels, despite the obvious dangers. The passages were narrow, unstable in places, and completely unmapped. They could potentially lead anywhere within the castle complex, or they could be dead ends that would trap anyone foolish enough to venture inside. "I know this castle better than anyone," Marcus explained to DCI Matthews when she expressed concerns about the risk. "If Whitmore is using these passages, I need to understand how they connect to the areas where the royal family spends their time. We can't protect them if we don't know all the ways someone could reach them. The exploration revealed a warren of ancient tunnels that seemed to extend far beyond the castle's current footprint. Some passages were blocked by centuries of debris and structural damage, but others were surprisingly well preserved. Most disturbing of all, they found evidence of recent use. Footprints, discarded food wrappers, and what appeared to be a temporary camp set up in a wider chamber deep beneath the castle. The campsite told a chilling story. Whitmore had been living beneath the castle for at least a week, possibly longer. He had accumulated supplies, established a base of operations, and from all appearances had been planning his next move. Maps of the castle were tacked to the tunnel walls, with detailed notes about guard rotations, family schedules, and potential targets. He's been watching us, Marcus realized as he examined the evidence. Every move we've made, every security change we've implemented, he's been observing and adapting his plans accordingly. The discovery of Whitmore's underground hideout triggered an immediate lockdown of the entire castle. All family members were moved to the most secure areas of the building. Additional guards were posted at every entrance, and specialist search teams began a systematic exploration of the entire tunnel network. The psychological pressure of knowing that Whitmore had been literally beneath their feet for days was enormous. He had been close enough to potentially reach the royal family at any time, had been observing their security measures, and had been planning what appeared to be an even more ambitious kidnapping attempt. Analysis of the materials found in Whitmore's camp revealed the scope of his surveillance operation. He had been using sophisticated listening devices to monitor conversations in various parts of the castle, had been tracking the movements of individual family members, and had been studying the responses to his first attempt with Prince Louis to identify weaknesses in the security protocols. He's learned from our response to the first incident, DCI Matthews explained to the expanded investigation team. He knows how long it takes us to mobilize search teams, he understands our communication protocols, and he's identified gaps in our coverage that he could potentially exploit. The tunnel network provided Whitmore with access to areas of the castle that were considered completely secure. Hidden entrances emerged in the walls of the royal family's private quarters, in storage areas near the kitchens, and even in the basement of the security command center itself. The ancient builders had created a network of passages that made the entire castle porous to anyone who understood how to navigate them. Marcus found himself working around the clock, leading teams through dangerous tunnel systems and helping to secure entrance points that had been unknown for centuries. The physical demands were enormous, but the psychological pressure was even greater. Every moment that Whitmore remained free increased the risk to the royal family. The investigation took a dramatic turn when technical specialists analyzing the surveillance equipment found in Whitmore's camp discovered that he had been in regular communication with outside accomplices. Cell phone records and encrypted messaging apps revealed a network of individuals who had been providing him with support, information, and potentially financial backing. This isn't the work of a lone individual with a personal grievance, DCI Matthews announced to the task force. Whitmore appears to be part of a larger conspiracy, possibly involving organized criminals who see kidnapping a royal family member as a way to generate enormous ransoms or political leverage. The scope of the conspiracy became clearer as investigators tracked the communications network. At least 6 individuals appeared to be directly involved in supporting Whitmore's operation, including someone who had been providing him with advanced surveillance equipment, and another who seemed to be handling financial arrangements for the planned ransom demands. International law enforcement agencies were brought into the investigation as evidence emerged that some of the conspirators might be based outside the United Kingdom. The planned kidnapping was apparently intended to be part of a larger operation that would have involved moving the victim out of the country to a location where ransom negotiations could be conducted safely. The pressure to capture Whitmore and his accomplices intensified when child psychologists reported that Prince Louis was showing signs of increased anxiety and sleep disturbances. The 5-year-old seemed to sense that the adults around him were worried about something, and his questions about the man in the uniform were becoming more frequent and distressed. He keeps asking if the hiding game is really over, Dr. Harper reported to the investigation team. He's a very perceptive child, and he can sense that something is still wrong. The ongoing security measures and changes to his routine are clearly affecting him. The royal family was facing an impossible situation. They needed to maintain heightened security measures to protect against the ongoing threat. But those very measures were traumatizing the children they were meant to protect. The ancient castle that had been their home was becoming a prison, filled with fears and restrictions that made normal family life impossible. Prince William and Catherine were struggling with their own emotions about the security breach. The knowledge that someone had been living beneath their home, watching their family, and planning to harm their children was almost unbearable. They were questioning whether Windsor Castle could ever be truly safe again, and considering the possibility of relocating the family permanently. The hunt for Whitmore reached a critical phase when thermal imaging equipment detected human heat signatures in a section of the tunnel network that hadn't yet been fully explored. The signatures appeared to be moving through passages that led toward the area beneath the royal family's private quarters. Marcus was part of the tactical team that moved to intercept Whitmore before he could reach his apparent target. The operation required extreme caution, as the narrow tunnels provided limited maneuvering room and multiple potential escape routes. The team had to balance the need to capture Whitmore quickly with the need to ensure that no one was injured in the process. The confrontation, when it came, was anticlimactic but terrifying in its implications. Whitmore was found in a chamber directly beneath Prince Louis's bedroom, equipped with sophisticated lock-picking tools and what appeared to be chloroform-soaked rags. He had been preparing to make another attempt on the prince, this time apparently planning to render him unconscious before moving him through the tunnel network. He was minutes away from potentially reaching Prince Louis, Marcus reported to DCI Matthews after Whitmore's capture. If we hadn't found those thermal signatures when we did, we might have been dealing with another kidnapping, this one potentially successful. Whitmore's arrest revealed the full extent of the conspiracy against the royal family. Under interrogation, he provided information about his accomplices and their plans, which extended far beyond a simple kidnapping for ransom. The group had apparently been planning to use Prince Louis as leverage in a political extortion scheme, demanding changes to government policy in exchange for the child's safe return. The international implications of the conspiracy were staggering. Several of the accomplices were found to have connections to hostile foreign intelligence services, suggesting that the kidnapping might have been intended as part of a broader effort to destabilize the British government or gather intelligence about royal security procedures. The discovery of advanced surveillance equipment in Whitmore's possession raised concerns about how much sensitive information about royal security had been compromised. The devices were capable of intercepting encrypted communications, recording conversations from significant distances, and transmitting data to remote locations in real time. As the investigation expanded to include the international conspiracy, Marcus found himself reflecting on how close they had come to a catastrophic failure of royal security. If Whitmore had succeeded in his second attempt, if the thermal imaging hadn't detected his presence, if the investigation had taken just a few days longer, Prince Louis might have disappeared into a network of criminals and foreign agents, with resources and planning capabilities far beyond what anyone had initially imagined. The arrest of Whitmore and the subsequent roundup of his accomplices provided some relief, but also highlighted the ongoing vulnerabilities in protecting the royal family. The ancient castle that was their home harbored secrets and access points that made complete security virtually impossible. Every historical feature that made Windsor special also created potential threats that would require constant vigilance to manage. The investigation was entering its final phases, but the implications of what had been uncovered would continue to reshape royal security for years to come. The incident had revealed not just individual criminal behavior, but systemic vulnerabilities that threatened the very foundation of how the royal family could safely live and work in their historical residences. Marcus knew that his life, and the lives of everyone responsible for protecting the royal family, had been forever changed by the events of the past month. The ancient walls of Windsor Castle would never again seem quite as solid or secure as they had before, and the responsibility of protecting the people within those walls had taken on new dimensions of complexity and urgency. The aftermath of David Whitmore's arrest and the exposure of the international conspiracy sent shockwaves through the highest levels of British government and intelligence services. What had begun as a single guard's discovery of a crying child had uncovered a sophisticated plot that involved foreign agents, advanced surveillance technology, and a level of penetration into royal security that no one had thought possible. In the weeks following Whitmore's capture, Marcus found himself at the center of a complete overhaul of Windsor Castle's security infrastructure. The ancient building was essentially gutted of its modern security systems and rebuilt from the ground up, with new technologies specifically designed to monitor the extensive network of hidden passages and chambers that the investigation had revealed. The scope of the renovations was unprecedented in the castle's modern history. Every hidden passage was mapped using advanced ground-penetrating radar and explored by specialized teams. Those that couldn't be permanently sealed due to historical preservation requirements were equipped with motion sensors, cameras, and automated locking systems that could be controlled from the Central Security Command Center. "We're essentially building a 21st century security system inside a 12th century castle," explained Commander Patricia Ross, who had been brought in to oversee the security overhaul. "Every decision requires balancing historical preservation with modern protection needs, and every solution creates new challenges. The human cost of the conspiracy was perhaps even more significant than the technological changes. Several members of the castle's long-serving staff were found to have unknowingly provided information to Whitmore during his legitimate work as a contractor. While none were charged with crimes, many felt deeply betrayed by their unwitting involvement in the plot against the royal family. Marcus himself struggled with the psychological aftermath of the events. The knowledge that a child had been in mortal danger just yards from where he conducted his daily patrols, and that sophisticated criminals had been operating beneath his feet for weeks, challenged his confidence in his ability to protect the royal family. "I keep wondering what else I might have missed," he confided to Dr. Rebecca Stone, the counselor who had been assigned to help security staff process the traumatic events. "How many other signs were there that I didn't recognize? How many other threats might be out there that we haven't discovered yet?" Dr. Stone helped Marcus understand that the conspiracy had been designed specifically to exploit the blind spots in even the most vigilant security professionals. The people behind this plot spent years studying royal security procedures and identifying weaknesses. You couldn't have detected threats that were designed to be undetectable using conventional methods. Prince Louis, meanwhile, was slowly recovering from his traumatic experience with the help of specialized child therapists and the loving support of his family. The 5-year-old had nightmares about the dark place for several weeks, but gradually began to understand that the hiding game was over and that the bad man wouldn't be coming back. The international investigation into Whitmore's accomplices revealed connections to criminal organizations and intelligence services in several countries. The planned kidnapping had apparently been intended as the first phase of a larger operation designed to gather intelligence about British government security procedures and potentially compromise other high-value targets. 3 of Whitmore's accomplices were arrested in coordinated raids across Europe, while 2 others were believed to have fled to countries without extradition treaties with the United Kingdom. The investigation revealed that the group had been planning similar operations against other members of European royal families, suggesting that the threat to Prince Louis was part of a much broader campaign of international terrorism. The technological analysis of the surveillance equipment recovered from Whitmore's operation provided disturbing insights into the sophistication of modern criminal and intelligence operations. The devices were capable of intercepting communications, recording conversations, and transmitting data in ways that made detection extremely difficult even for experienced security professionals. "We're dealing with threats that didn't exist even 5 years ago," explained Detective Chief Inspector Matthews during a briefing for senior government officials. "The technology available to criminals and hostile intelligence services has evolved faster than our ability to defend against it, particularly in historical buildings that weren't designed with modern security requirements in mind." The legal proceedings against Whitmore and his accomplices became one of the most closely watched criminal cases in recent British history. While much of the evidence was presented in closed sessions to protect national security information, the basic facts of the case shocked the public and led to widespread calls for increased security measures around the royal family. Whitmore himself proved to be a complex figure during his trial. His defense team portrayed him as a man driven to desperation by financial difficulties and manipulated by more sophisticated criminal associates. However, the evidence of his extensive planning and surveillance activities suggested a level of calculated malice that went far beyond desperation. The defendant spent months studying the movements and routines of innocent children, the prosecutor stated during closing arguments. He prepared equipment specifically designed to render a 5-year-old unconscious, and he created hiding places where that child could be held against his will. These are not the actions of someone driven by desperation, but of someone who chose to become a predator targeting the most vulnerable members of our society. The international implications of the case led to significant changes in intelligence sharing between allied nations. New protocols were established for monitoring threats against royal families and other high-value targets, and joint task forces were created to investigate transnational criminal organizations that might target government officials or their families. Marcus was ultimately promoted to Senior Protection Officer and assigned to lead the new Royal Passage Security Unit, a specialized team responsible for monitoring and securing the hidden areas within royal residences. The position was both an honor and a burden, as it made him responsible for protecting against threats that most people couldn't even imagine. The creation of the Royal Passage Security Unit represented a fundamental shift in how royal protection was conceptualized. Rather than focusing primarily on external threats in public areas, the new approach recognized that historical buildings contained internal vulnerabilities that required specialized knowledge and equipment to address. "We're essentially creating a new discipline within royal protection," Marcus explained to recruits during one of the first training sessions for the new unit. "You need to think like a historian, an engineer, and a security professional all at the same time. Every stone in these ancient walls could potentially conceal a passage, and every passage could potentially conceal a threat. The training program for the Royal Passage Security Unit combined traditional security skills with specialized knowledge about architectural history, structural engineering, and archaeological investigation techniques. Team members learned to read ancient building plans, operate ground-penetrating radar equipment, and navigate safely through unstable medieval passages. The psychological impact of the events extended far beyond the immediate participants. Royal staff throughout the system had to adjust to new security procedures, increased scrutiny of their activities, and the knowledge that their workplace contained hidden dangers that had been exploited by criminals. The sense of safety and familiarity that had characterized daily life in the royal residences was permanently altered. Prince William and Catherine made the difficult decision to temporarily relocate their family to a more modern and secure residence while the security renovations at Windsor Castle were completed. The move was particularly hard on Prince Louis, who had to leave behind familiar surroundings while still processing his traumatic experience in the hidden chamber. "He keeps asking when we can go home," Catherine confided to Dr. Bro Harper during one of their family counseling sessions. "I don't know how to explain to a 5-year-old that home isn't safe anymore, that the walls he thought protected him were actually hiding dangers we never knew existed." The media coverage of the case, while necessarily limited to protect security information, raised important questions about the balance between historical preservation and modern security requirements. Public debate focused on whether ancient buildings could ever be made truly secure, and whether the royal family should consider relocating to purpose-built modern residences. Heritage preservation experts argued that the historical significance of buildings like Windsor Castle made them irreplaceable cultural treasures that should be preserved regardless of security challenges. Security professionals countered that the safety of the people living in these buildings had to be the primary consideration, even if it required significant modifications to historical structures. The renovation of Windsor Castle ultimately represented a compromise between these competing interests. The most significant hidden passages were sealed permanently, while others were preserved but equipped with modern security systems. The work required the expertise of archaeologists, structural engineers, security specialists, and historical preservation experts working in unprecedented collaboration. Marcus often reflected on the chain of events that had led from his hearing a child crying in a corridor to uncovering an international conspiracy against the royal family. The incident had changed his life, his career, and his understanding of what it meant to protect people who lived in buildings that were themselves pieces of living history. The final report on the Whitmore case, while heavily redacted for security reasons, became a landmark document in the fields of both royal protection and heritage security. It established new protocols for assessing and addressing security vulnerabilities in historical buildings, and it provided a template for other countries facing similar challenges in protecting their own cultural and political institutions. Years later, as Marcus conducted his patrols through the renovated corridors of Windsor Castle, he sometimes paused near the tapestry-lined corridor where he had first heard Prince Louis crying. The hidden passage behind the wall had been permanently sealed, but he could still visualize the narrow opening and the frightened child he had found beyond it. The castle was safer now, protected by technology and procedures that would have been unimaginable when he first began his career as a royal guard. But the experience had taught him that security was not just about technology and procedures. It was about vigilance, intuition, and the willingness to trust one's instincts when something felt wrong. Prince Louis, now older and resilient, sometimes waved to Marcus from the windows of the family's restored quarters. The child seemed to have no lasting trauma from his experience, but Marcus knew that the events of that November evening had changed all of their lives forever. The ancient walls of Windsor Castle had revealed their secrets, and in doing so, had forced everyone who lived and worked within them to confront the complex reality of protecting a modern family in a building that carried the weight of centuries of history. The story of the royal guard who found Prince Louis behind a hidden wall had become a classified chapter in the history of royal protection, but its lessons continued to influence how security professionals approached their vital work of keeping safe those who serve the nation while living in buildings that are themselves national treasures.